All right, welcome to the Explainer. Today, we're going to take a hammer to this glittering marble idea of the Roman Empire's golden age. You know the one. We're here to uncover the brutal, kind of paradoxical reality that was really powering one of history's most famous eras of peace.
So, where does this whole idea even come from? Well, you can pretty much thank this guy, the famous historian Edward Gibbon. He's the one who painted this picture of the 2nd century AD as like the absolute high point for humanity. Peak peace, peak prosperity. It's an incredibly powerful image, right? And it's basically shaped how we've all thought about Rome ever since.
But the amazing vision? It just begs the question, doesn't it? A question we really can't ignore. What was the real price tag on all this happiness? And maybe even more important, who actually had to foot the bill?
And that leads us straight into our first big kind of mind-bending paradox, the legendary Pax Romana, the Roman peace. See, this wasn't some peace born out of everyone holding hands. No, it was a peace forged and then maintained by just systematic, overwhelming violence.
So the official PR, the story the Romans told themselves and Gibbon told us, was all about order and civilization. The idea was that Roman law, Roman culture, it was this gentle, powerful influence that just kind of cemented everything together. It's a really nice thought, isn't it?
Yeah, but the reality on the ground, it could be absolutely horrifying. I mean, look at this quote. We're not talking about some far-flung frontier here. This is the entrance to Rome itself. It just goes to show you Roman power wasn't just about gentle influence. It was often asserted through just ruthless, brutal bloodshed right out in the open for everyone to see.
And that's really the key takeaway here. The famous Pax Romana, it wasn't about an absence of violence, not at all. It was about a monopoly on violence. See, Rome didn't end war. It just won the war so completely, so decisively, that nobody else even dared to start a fight. It was peace through sheer, brutal domination. So how'd they enforce this monopoly? Well, here are the tools of the trade, so to speak. You had overwhelming force out in the provinces, crushing revolts in places like Judea and Britain. But you also had just terrifying discipline at home. I mean, decimation? Killing 1 out of every 10 of your own soldiers if they mutinied? That's intense. Add in constant conquest to secure the borders, and of course, the bloody spectacles in the Colosseum, and you see this whole piece was really built on a foundation of terror.
Now, this foundation of terror, it allowed Rome to build some truly spectacular things. Which brings us to our next big contradiction. The beautiful marble city you see in your mind's eye versus the grim, dirty reality for the more than 1 million people who actually lived there.
First off, let's just try to wrap our heads around the scale here. We're talking about a population of over 1 million people. At its peak, Rome was a metropolis like nothing the world had ever seen before. It was this massive magnet, just pulling in people from all across the empire.
And this is where you see that split personality of the city. On the one hand, you have the marble facade, right? The gleaming temples, the amazing aqueducts. But for most Romans, life was lived on the other side of this chart. We're talking cramped, rickety apartment buildings that could collapse, a constant stench from open sewers. And yeah, you literally had to worry about the contents of chamber pots being chucked out of windows above you.
I mean, this quote just nails it. To live in Rome was to live in the shadow of death. Think about that. For most people, life in this incredible, peerless capital was just precarious. The constant threats weren't barbarians at the gate, they were fire, buildings collapsing, and disease creeping up from the river. And living inside this dangerous, crowded city was a population that was just split right down the middle. And this might be the most profound paradox of them all. The massive, uncrossable gap between what it meant to be a Roman citizen and the total dehumanization of being a slave. You see, to really get what freedom meant to a Roman, you have to understand that it was defined by what it wasn't. And what it wasn't was slavery. It was everything. Even the absolute poorest citizen had a tiny shred of dignity, a legal standing that a slave could never even dream of. Liberty and servitude, they weren't just different, they were 2 sides of the very same coin. One couldn't exist without the other.
And let's be super clear about what a slave was. Not just an unpaid worker. The source calls them a hireling for life. Legally, they were property, a commodity, a living tool, there to serve their masters' every single desire. Their whole purpose, in a way, was to make the person who owned them look and feel more powerful, more dignified, more Roman.
And if you want to see how dehumanizing this was, just look at the slave market. It was a chillingly practical business. People were priced based on their usefulness. Physical beauty, especially for sexual purposes, that cost a lot. So did special skills, like being a doctor or a teacher. They even used ethnic stereotypes to price people. Gauls are good herdsmen, that kind of thing. Dealers even had to tell you if a slave was likely to try to run away or commit suicide. And this is really grotesque. There was even a market for people with so-called exotic deformities. It's just the total commodification of a human being.
Okay, so we've looked at these massive contradictions, right? Peace that comes from violence, splendor that's built on top of squalor, and a concept of freedom that's defined by slavery. So why? Why are we still so fascinated by this empire? What gives it such a powerful grip on us?
Well, the source material has a pretty compelling idea. It says that Rome is like a mirror, and when we look into it, we feel flattered by what we see. We see the parts of the reflection that look like us at our best, the order, the engineering, the law, and we tend to just kind of ignore the ugly, brutal stuff that was holding that mirror up. And that really leaves us with one last big question. And it's not just about Rome. It's about any great empire, past or present. When we judge these great powers, when we look at their legacy, we have to ask ourselves, what parts of that reflection are we choosing to look away from?